Most of you know me by now, so I'll skip that. Petar, he's our CTO. He's the brainchild and genius around doing a lot of the AI and the chatbot components that you've been seeing. He was actually coding, and we're pushing to production the Copilot features that we are demoing today. So those are really, really hot off the presses. And then we have Eric here today. So Eric was in the keynote this morning and is our VP of product. So we're going to be doing more of an interactive. So we'll kind of set some things up around AI and kind of what it means. And then we're going to dive a little bit deeper on how we're doing this stuff, kind of the industry overall, kind of how we're thinking about it, and how you should be thinking about AI. And then we'll dive deeper into the chatbot components, and you will get an opportunity to ask some questions. So this is, over the last 6 months, AI and generative AI specifically have kind of moved very, very quickly. There's a really good article from Bill Gates says the age of AI has begun. And if you haven't read it, take a look at it. Bill Gates notes or Gates notes. It's a really great resource for thought leadership around this stuff. And basically, what it's saying is that artificial intelligence is It's as revolutionary as mobile phones and the internet. So it's really a transformational component of what we're doing in our daily lives. If you've seen, and if you're on the camp of, holy shit, we're all going to lose our jobs. So this was a report kind of around March, April. This was from Goldman Sachs, and this was a North America and Europe report saying that 300 million jobs will be lost or degraded by AI. But really, what does that mean? It just means that there is opportunity there for productivity. And we're seeing that staff challenges have hit us really a lot, right? So rather than thinking about it as we're going to lose our jobs, we think about it, hey, it's going to help us be more productive and actually do more of the things that we need to do. And if you look at this report over here, this is from EAB, saying that nearly 80% of respondents on the survey saying that their campuses have open positions, and 82 said they're having a really hard time filling those with qualified applicants as well. There was another report very recently from McKinsey, and basically what it's saying is that 4.4 trillion a year, that's the impact that generative AI could add up to, and this is a global report. So what that means is that the equivalent value of 4.4 trillion of productivity of work is going to be generated by AI or the equivalent of that. And one of the things to highlight there is that if you look at this report, it has this really nice graph where it has different industries. And one of the nice things is it says, okay, here's at the bottom, you have your impact as percentage of functional spend, how much people are spending or how much organizations are spending, like the cost, and then the impact in terms of abilities, the value. So for a lot less money, the impact is on sales and marketing is going to be tremendous. So essentially saying that marketing and sales are the two top industries that are going to be impacted, and the value creation there is tremendous, right? And we're going to achieve that a lot faster, that value creation. There's also, this is something that now we should start thinking about it. It's like, okay, what does that mean for us? Greg Bachman, he's the OpenAI co-founder, and he, really great person to kind of dive deeper into some of the stuff that he's doing, but this is a really great quote that I like. Every organization, government or otherwise, is going to have to understand AI. So hopefully in this conference, you get a little bit of an understanding about AI, generative AI, and what it is, and we can kind of not necessarily think about it or have an opinion if it's good or bad, but it's just a tool, right? It's something that, how does it affect us? How does it work? And then how can we use it? All right, so what is generative AI? And we're going to talk about generative AI. We've been talking, this morning we talked about or right before this session, natural language processing, query language processing, how that works, querying your data. You saw some of the forecasting that you can do now in there, and actually it was something that you had to have data in Excel and do logistical regressions and forecasting and do all of that stuff. Well, that's just one click now, right? One little button click, and you can forecast any dimension. You can forecast your inquiries and all of that stuff. So that is different from generative AI, right? That is machine learning, that's AI, that's around the data component. Generative AI is the type of artificial intelligence that creates new content based on what it's learned in existing content. So the process of that existing content is called training. So we train a lot of these models. And essentially, a lot of the models that you have seen, they're really, really large. And when you train these models, you can give it a prompt. And generative AI uses this statistical model. Basically, it's saying, OK, based on all my data that have been trained to what's the next likely word or the next likely piece of content that I'm getting based on this input or based on this prompt. So it's pretty simple when it comes to it, right? And probably the best example that you've seen is ChatGPT. So the best chatbot out there that you've probably seen today is ChatGPT. ChatGPT is actually an implementation of a large language model underneath. It's actually one of the fastest growing products out there. It reached about 100 million users in less than 2 months. And if you look at this graph, it took Instagram, Spotify, Twitter like years to get to those numbers. And it took them less than 2 months to get, and I think they're about 175 million right now in terms of users. Really, really fast. And the reason for that is because it's easy, fast to use. So this natural language interaction and conversations actually works really well. And it's very good for us because all of us can do it, and we understand and we see the value right away. That's why you see that marketing and sales is really, really high on that. So when we talk about ChatGPT, it's actually a large language model implementation chatbot. It's developed by OpenAI, and it's designed and fine-tuned to respond to natural language, instructions, and text-based inputs. Mouthful, right? It's like, what the hell is that? So here's another graph for you, or here's kind of a visualization, because when you think AI, you have this big picture in your head, and then everything falls under it. But there's different areas underneath AI that focus on different things. And deep learning or machine learning is actually the overall big sphere here, and then deep learning is something underneath that uses neural networks. And underneath that, you have things like large language models, you have generative AI, you have a lot of other components as well. So today we're going to talk about large language models, and that's really a subset of deep learning. So when you talk about large language models, and I'm going kind of fast because I want to show you stuff, right? This is more setup. So hopefully this is useful. Tell me if I'm going a little too fast. We can slow down a little bit. We're good? All right. We're keeping up. Great. Whew. All right. So how this works, we said that generative AI, you have to give it a prompt, and then you have to tell, OK, based on this, predict what comes next, right? That can be text, it can be pixels, it can be whatever. So that's kind of how it works. If you think about here, the idea of large language model is that you give it a prefix of text, our prompt, and then it kind of predicts what's next. So if we tell a dog, it says barks, right? That's probabilistically the best thing that comes after that. If I say, I took my dog to the park, then it's going to give me other words after that. So if we look at this, that's kind of the way we think about it. It's generating text afterwards, it's generating content afterwards. So these large general purpose models can be pre-trained and then fine-tuned for specific purposes. So it's not just the basic of, okay, this is very, very raw at the level that it's generating more text, right? If we think about how we do it, it's like, an example is like how you train a dog. So a good canine citizen, like you train it and you say, sit, come, down, stay. If you're like my dog, you're probably not trained at all. So it's but that's the basic training, right? That's every dog. But then if you want to go a little bit further and specialize it for certain tasks and certain training, then if you're doing a specialty service dog, like a police dog, guiding dog, you fine-tune them and train them even further, right? So that's kind of the idea here. And when you think about this, in terms of how it works for large language models, you have your base large language models, things like that, like ChatGPT, like GPT. Well, we're going to say ChatGPT is an implementation of a large language model. So when you think about it, it says, once upon a time there was a unicorn that lived in magical forest. So it's generating the black text underneath, right? And then if we ask it a question, what is the capital of France? The most likely next sentence will probably be, what is France's largest city? What is France's population? Because statistically, for text, that makes sense. Those are seen right next to each other. Now, we go through a process, or these models go through a process of actually fine-tuning, right? And ChatGPT is what's called an instruction-tuned large language model, meaning that it's built to answer questions, and it's built so you can interact with it in this kind of instruction-based, right? You give it instructions, and then it kind of tells you and does things for you. So when you do it like that, then basically what they have done is they've said, okay, we're going to take the raw base model, and now we're going to employ a lot of humans to build questions and to build answers that are good. So we're going to tell them we're going to feed them to the model, we're going to fine-tune it, so it understands that these are good responses to give to us. So actually OpenAI, they call this a reinforcement learning with human feedback, and they hired, a whole ton of people to build this data set, this fine-tuning data set. And that's where you hear things like, oh, it took us 6 months. We had these models. It took us 6 months to bring them to the market, and so on and so forth. And the idea there is because they are fine-tuning them to be helpful, honest, harmless, right? And in this case, when you do that, then it comes with, what is the capital of France? Capital of France is Paris. It's giving you an answer. So it's fine-tuned for that, right? And of course, this is a crazy chart that you probably are like, what the hell is going on here? But it kind of gives you kind of a tree of how these large language models have evolved, right? And kind of where they are. You see a lot of companies in here. You see a lot of GPT, but you see also ChatGPT here, which is InstructGPT. So you see Codex, which is a coding one. And then all the way up here, you see, for example, you see GPT-4, which is the latest model. It's probably one of the best models from OpenAI right now. And then you have Bard, and you probably have heard of Bard from Google. And you see a lot of Meta in here. Meta, these filled-in ones are really interesting because the ones with the filled-in ones are open source, and the other ones, the empty ones, are actually closed source. So there's a huge effort being done by a lot of companies to open source a lot of these models so they can be used for a lot more things. All right, so then what happens is essentially you take these base models and you feed it all your data, and large companies like Bloomberg, for example, they have a lot of proprietary data, so they build their own special versions. Rather than building like a chatbot, they're building an LLM like a chatbot, but actually answering questions for finances, right? So it's like it's able to analyze reports and things like that. You also have other companies not necessarily using their own data sets, but using like the OpenAI and kind of building their data sets on top of it. So we talked about this morning, this chart doesn't come out very well, but we have companies that are using this OpenAI, and they are building specific implementations of chatbots and generative AI tools around specific areas, right? So development or design tools or bookkeeping and so on and so forth. And that's exactly what we've done at Element, right? The way we think about it is, you saw this morning, we have BoltBot, which is really an implementation of a chatbot helping that student. So think about it as an assistant. Who knows what this is from? Her, there we go. So her, it's an assistant, right? So you're conversing with her. It's something that it's warm, and it's maybe somewhat capable of doing certain things, but as humans, we feel that we crave that connection. So the more naturally one of these technologies can be, the better it is for us. And I'll hand this, obviously there's every sector, every company is going to kind of be affected by this. Obviously I can hand this, I'm going to hand it off to, okay. So I'll hand it off to Eric to kind of take us through the next kind of phase, but I wanted to set this up so you understand what the technologies are, and it's not this magical thing. There's a lot of data that goes into it, but this is kind of the process that a lot of the companies are going. This is the state. This is literally the state of AI and generative AI that's happening right now. We didn't necessarily talk a little bit about some of the things on image generation, but we can talk about that as well.
So obviously, this changes a lot for us in this room, right? As we were just talking about, every app you open, right, from Snapchat to Google to Bing, they've all got their chatbots and their large language models. And one of the reasons for that is natural language, and if you were in the last session with Q, is a really compelling interface, right? We're getting things done for thousands of years by conversing with each other, right? So the next natural thing is for software to finally catch up with that. So we talked about changing student expectations, and some of this is a repeat from this morning, and I know we really want to see like the stuff. So we'll blow through these pretty quickly, but just remember, our students, they're using all of those other tools, right? Snapchat has an AI in it now that people can chat within Snapchat to an AI. So we want to meet those changing expectations. Again, conversational, throughout element, multi-channel, holds complete conversations. And this is one of the things we're going to look at a little bit about how to set this up, right? OpenAI has done a lot of the heavy lifting, and then the rest of the heavy lifting, Petar has done. And it's the truth, right, of making sure that your BoltBot is serving you and not out there picking up extraneous information. Yeah?
Yeah, I can. So I can explain this. This slide shows embeddings. The embeddings are a crucial part for chatbots to be able to converse with us, because chatbots, they're computers. They don't understand language. So one of the problems there is, how do you transform language into something that they could understand? They do understand numbers, right? Binary, they do that. So what you can do, and that's what they built, a base model, like similar like here you have GPT-4. You have a base model that can convert a text to a vector of numbers. So imagine just a sequence of numbers. That vector has encoded meaning of the text that it translated. So how they did that, how they fine-tuned GPT, they fine-tuned this model the same way. They did a lot of tests, a lot of data going in, training it, seeing does that match accurately. So some of the examples can be when you say, there's a bank, right? Does that mean a river bank or a bank as a financial concept? So that's a single word, but then you have a second word that can maybe denote that meaning. So a river bank then immediately points that vector is like a representation in a multidimensional space. We cannot see that in our heads. We're used to 3D and 2D, but it's like 1,000 dimensions. It points it somewhere in that coordinate system, and all the things related to it will live close to it. So you'll have a riverbank, probably a forest nearby, maybe sea. So that's how it understands similar concepts. If you think, maybe that's how we think as well. Maybe they're trying to figure out how we are also reasoning about things. We don't know. You saw that on GPT-4 examples. GPT-4 is really good at also understanding what you are saying, giving you ideas. Sometimes it makes mistakes, but all it's doing, as Ardis has shown, is generating the next word in a sequence. The trick, how they figured out to make it this good, they added a feedback. So they're like, okay, I just need to generate next thing, but what if I knew what I did before? And that's the magic. That's how it works. That's why it's so smart. So again, maybe that's all that we are doing as well. So we'll see. But can you just go that slide back?
Sure.
So we were talking about text, but if you think about other sources, video, audio, well, they're already binary, right? We see them on screen, but they're also zeros and ones under the hood. So you could encode meaning into them. So the same process then applies.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's, so, you know, it's not just text, right? When we talk about AI, generative AI, the base components of it is just the vector embeddings, and actually we're doing math on these things to get the next thing and the next thing. So our world is represented by images, video, or video is moving images, represented by text, by audio. So all that stuff now comes in, and when these next models are coming around, they're going to be, or they are multimodal models, right? So multimodal means that you can prompt it with an image and it can actually get text. You can prompt it with voice and it can actually get text or an image. So the meaning of those can kind of change as well. And that's kind of the next evolution as we're going through these multimodal models.
True. And here is a good example of something on the left. You see the lexical search. You have probably used it in all the products used daily. Whenever you do search, it's mostly keyword based. It does do synonyms sometimes, but it's really hard if the content you're searching does not contain the actual word you're searching. On the right side, you have the semantic search. So as we were talking about the embeddings, right, converting text to a meaning. Well, what if the query you have, you also convert that to meaning and you compare the meanings? In the end, it's a math problem. It's a math problem. You're just calculating distance between two numbers and finding what's close to it. That's how semantic search works. Semantic search is a really important aspect. So imagine you're building a QA chatbot. That chatbot needs to answer questions based on meaning, right? And you have your source documents. So you need to first encode those source documents, and then you can run a semantic search on them. So that's what powers chatbots today.
Yeah, here's a better example of that, right?
Yes.
So, yeah.
I can.
Go ahead.
So this is interesting. You get the content in the application. I don't understand
So essentially, what's happening here is, when you think about how we're, sorry, I didn't know you couldn't hear me before. So when you're thinking about how we've implemented Element, we talk about hallucinations, right? So hallucinations are actually effects of thinking about the next word based on what they had learned and based on the knowledge base. But we don't want that. We want it to be grounded on our content. We don't want the bots to answer questions from chat. We don't want it to be ChatGPT. We want it to be our institutional bot, only specific for. So we need to feed it in that prompt. We need to give it all the context on that question that the person answered. So that's exactly what we're doing, right? So we're essentially having, we're stuffing it, right? We're giving it our own content, and then we're converting those to embeddings, and then we're searching your content based on the meaning of what that question was, and then we're returning that back, and then we're sending it to the model, and we're saying, hey, here's the question, here's the conversation history, here is a lot of content that we think is very relevant to the question that was asked, and now give us an answer based on this, right? So it's not a lot of magic, but we have to do a lot of things behind the scenes in order to feed it the context, the appropriate context. So that's kind of the way it works, right? That's how it doesn't, it's not just ChatGPT, it is a lot more than that with your content in it.
True, and a good example that you can use is if you look at ChatGPT, anyone can now open it up, enter like a piece of text, like give it like, hey, this is the information you have, this is the question, answer this question based on this information. That's what Ardis explained. That's why you ground it in that content. You don't allow it to imagine things up. You want to use it only to synthesize the information.
Right. So we showed this a lot earlier on, right? We showed this how we are feeding it context from our knowledge base, the conversation history. We're feeding it from the institution information, user profile to get us to that final answer, right? So we're stuffing all this context in for the chatbot, so it has all that information. We're pulling everything together, we're stuffing in, and then we're kind of, so that's really difficult to do from our side, and that's what we've been working over the past few months to take all that, and it's easy to use the OpenAI, say, hey, give me a question about this, but kind of orchestrating all of that, finding the semantic meaning. So rather than going through it, maybe we can kind of show a little bit of how the knowledge base works.
Demo time.
All right, so here we are in conversations, and but first, before we jump into conversations in the bot itself, let's talk a little bit about the knowledge and how we stuff it full of information, right? So under data and automations, you'll get a new area called knowledge, and this allows you to provide it all of that institutional knowledge that you want your bot to have to share. really easy to come in here and add an article. We've got a couple of different ways you can do this. You can take a bunch of text, technical term, blobs of text, right, from whatever existing documents you have, copy and paste them directly into here, and in minutes, you know, I can just do a little bit here. Yeah, we'll do a URL. We can also do a single web page, right? So if you've got a single web page full of content, you can point it to a URL and we'll learn that, right? But when we're learning that, what we're actually doing is making that content into those vectors so our large language model can interpret that and give that data back to the students.
I could elaborate more on that. So what happens technically here, your website is accessible on the internet. We can download that. We can parse the content, extract it, create little chunks, and then create those embeddings that we were seeing. And we actually have a special database where we store them so we can search for them semantically.
So you can see right now we're learning the Engage website, webpage right now. And in just a few seconds, a minute or two, this will go ahead and learn that information so we can try to get it. So right there, it's learned that. Now one of the things, and Petar, maybe you can talk a little bit about this, under the hood of BoltBot, we're telling BoltBot that you are a helpful assistant for a particular university. So while I jump over to the chat, you can talk a little bit about that and why when we ask it something about the Engage conference, it may not like it.
So yeah, for the chatbots, our idea is that over time you will be able to have different personas. On different websites, you might want to have different chatbots doing different things. Right now, how BoltBot is built, it has everything. It has all the tools, it has all the knowledge, but you might want to specify. A good example is later, we might want to have a guidance bot that can help your students drive them. And this here, here's an example. This is appointments, right?
This is it trying to be a helpful assistant for Training University.
True. So in this case, what happened, because it does have skills to register people for events, it does have skills to book appointments, it probably matched the agenda with that.
I threw a curve in there.
Yeah.
He sure did.
So what happens now, we are asking ChatGPT with the whole history of the conversation plus the user context, we're asking it, hey, what should we do next? What do you recommend based on those tools that you have at your disposal? It detected that you asked for a different time, so it used a tool that's actually the one that gives you more available times listed there. And you see all the helpful little quick actions down there, so you don't need to type all the dates.
Right, but of course if I wanted to type, I could go ahead and do that and say, sign me up for July 7th.
And you can see the helpful progress screen because we know how Chatbot is thinking. It gives us certain points in time that we can detect and we can tell the students. So students are not just waiting an empty screen. They can see the progress.
And now I can go ahead and open the link and I've been dropped directly into our events module. And in this case, we didn't know who this student was, right? It was an anonymous web chat, so we've not pre-populated any information. If we had known who this student is, we could have gone ahead and pre-populated in the first name, last name, some of that other information that the student, that we knew about the student. But there are other tools we can use here as well, right? And BoltBot is also about being a member of your team and working alongside of you. And it's not going to know everything, right? So sometimes students are going to come in with questions that the bot either doesn't have that information and access to that information. So we could talk about something like an account balance. So maybe the student says, hey, to speak to...
And this is really important. You don't want your students to get trapped with a bot. They'll get frustrated. They need a way to escape. There's two ways. Students can come in and ask, hey, I want to talk to a human. And second, if bot does not know an answer, 2 times in a row, it will prompt, hey, I can switch you to somebody else to help you with your prompt.
Now in this case, the student has asked to speak to someone, so the bot immediately said, hey, I will connect you with that. But now this is where some of the things are happening behind the scenes. So if we come back to conversations here, what we can see is this conversation that was going on the web chat is right here in conversations. We can see that Bolt was handling this conversation. I've got full visibility into everything the bot has said. But you can see down here at the bottom that when the bot handed this conversation off to a person, that it disabled itself and it told the user, hey, hold on 1 minute. Now, what we've got going on behind the scenes here, and we talked a little bit about this earlier today, is the idea of these intents and detecting the intents. So one of the things we can do is if I come in here to my conversation settings, is those automation rules that you guys are using today for to do assignments for if it's a certain user, I want to assign this conversation. If they're chatting from a certain web page, hey, assign this conversation to this user. You can now do that with bot handoff intents. So you can see we've set up a account balance intent here. And this is a really simple rule. All I needed to do was say, hey, give me, when you hand off and you think the person's talking about account balances, do these things, right?
Can you open it up just to see how it's easy to set up?
Yeah.
So as you see, this is just a text field.
Couple of words, right?
Just text field. Why this works? Because we use AI to detect the intents as well. We use GPT, we tell it, hey, what was the idea? And because you already entered the intents here, we could then say, hey, you have this list, find the one that matches the query. And you can run actions.
Yeah, so now we detect that intent, we say, hey, this student is asking about their account balance, so we want to take some actions. Now, one of the things we had to do here is actually expand the action, so now you can do more than one action on this intent, right? If you've used conversation rules before, you'll know that you used to only be able to do a single action, right? When one condition, one action. Now we can do multiple actions, which means when this account balance intent comes in, we're going to take and assign that conversation to Eric. And we're also going to run a workflow. So we now have all the powers of workflows tied to the bot to be able to help us know the next things we want to do. So anything you can do in a workflow, right? Send a communication to the student, following up, depending on the scenario. Or in this case, this workflow is actually building a task that is going to create a task for me to say, hey, follow up with this student because they had a query about their account balance. And that might be really helpful if this is happening at night, right? You want a task for the next morning for when you come in. So these are really powerful ways that the bot can work alongside us, and we can see some of the things that are going on with the bot.
Can you show how you can enable the bot?
Absolutely. So to set up the bot is really fast, right? So you come into conversation settings and the chatbot, and with just a few kind of minor configurations, give it an avatar, give it a greeting, and really, you give it some knowledge and that's it. So in a little bit, 15, 20 minutes, you can have your first bot conversation, and you can test the bot right here in the preview, right? If you want to limit when the bot is active on certain pages or certain times of day, of course, you can do that just like you can do with live chat today. So it's really, really fast. Has anyone ever worked with what I'll call a last-gen chatbot before? Where you spent weeks and months, right, doing Q&A pairs, and not just a question and a answer, but here's the 5 different ways we think a student might potentially ask that. And then what happens? You didn't capture the other 5, right? So you're constantly adding, well, these are the 10 versions of this question, right, to one answer. And that takes weeks, months, sometimes years to get it really, really well, right? In our knowledge base, you literally add the knowledge just like you were training an employee. Here's a website to read, here's a text document to read, and it can immediately begin to process those questions.
And over time, you will see in the knowledge base, we'll be adding more sources. You'll be able to add PDFs, Word documents, and we'll be able to parse that and ingest that as well. You could show the sitemap as well.
Yeah,
it's important to explain.
So one of the things that you can do as well is add whole sections of a website, right? Or an entire website if that's what you wanted to do. So let's, we'll use Element. And you can see when I put in the URL, we're actually fetching the sitemap. And you can see these are all the pages that are on the Element website, right? So I can select multiples of these pages. I can say, hey, I only want pages that are in /blog, and it will give me just those items, right? And in that fast of a time, I can start training my model, right? The biggest thing that you need to be concerned about is that you're just feeding it sources of truth, right? And so one thing you may not want to do, right, from a best practice perspective is go to your .edu homepage and say, index the whole website, right? We know that there's conflicting information on our sites institutionally, but if you know that, hey, this section of our website, I'm the admissions person and I know /admissions is really good content that I want the bot to know, you can take all of those web pages very, very quickly. Your /programs, right? Academic majors are usually pretty good web pages. So these are things that in just mere minutes, you can have your knowledge base feeding in, and you can see the articles ticking by that we're learning here. So let's take a look at one other thing here, and let me turn BoltBot back on that particular conversation, is there are some times where we need more than just general information, right? And general knowledge. We need to know about the person. Or we need to understand that context. So here I'm going to go ahead and turn the chatbot back onto that same conversation I was having. And now BoltBot is back in action here. And I can say, hey, so now obviously we need to know what application, right? Whose application it
seems it's disabled.
Is it still disabled? Let me do it this way. Oh, it's still disabled.
Have you this? Oh, you go to settings. You enable the setting for when it's active.
Oh, good call, Petar.
Live debugging. So watch out for that.
Better than having to call live support. So let's go ahead and we're going to ask it about my application. So here we need to know who they're thinking away. We need to know who this student is, right? And we don't want to just give out application statuses or other personal information without understanding who that is, right? But we have a whole universe in our CRM, in Element, that we know who these people are, right? So we're going to go ahead and give it an email address.
And when you're entering your email, or if it asks you for a code, you can write in natural language. You can say, here is my email, or my email is that. It's able to extract that information from the text. So what's happening now? The chatbot detected, it checked that student exists in the system. It will send a verification code to their email. They need to confirm they own that email, because that's the only way they can then have access to the information.
So again, in this case, like Petar said, I'm not giving it just the code. I'm saying, hey, my code is this in the bot. And you can see the little avatars flashed there. So that was BoltBot verifying that, okay, now I know who this is. This is Amber, and I can now get her particular status. So here, Amber submitted an application for electrical power and control major for spring 2023, and it's under review right now, right? So you can see there's lots of these kinds of tools that we can start giving students the information they want, when they want it, when they need it. They don't have to wait until the next morning. They don't have to call during business hours. They can get a lot of this information, and we've got tools, as we've shown, appointments earlier today, events, application status, starting new applications. So really, really powerful stuff. And it's literally growing every day. So every day we're innovating and pulling together more and more ideas and ways that we can leverage the chatbots.
So one thing, the tools are going to be really important here. And as we're growing our use cases for BoltBot, we are going to add more and more of these tools. Like we said this morning, it's going to be integrated in every specific area. So you technically no longer need a portal to go in and check your status. You can just ask the bot and you're authenticated and you can get those statuses and converse with it. So now the whole experience is kind of integrated into this. I know we have about 5 more minutes left, so I want to leave some time for questions. Do we have a mic? Yep.
Question?
When you direct it to a particular website to learn that information, does it have the ability to learn the information that's contained within embedded videos, or is it strictly the text?
So what it's actually doing is loading that web page just like a browser would, and it's going through the text information and it's stripping out any of the HTML code. So basically it's reading just like a search engine would. It's reading all that content and it's pulling it in. So any videos that are in there, it's not going to know the content of that video. One of the things that, like Petar said, in the future, there's going to be many more loaders that we can add. So you can technically add a YouTube URL in there and we can pull the transcript from that, or you can add Vimeo URLs. A lot of these services are adding transcripts by default right now, so that can be something. But we don't have a video loader right now. We only have text, a particular web page, and maybe a multi-page site.
For sending the code to authenticate, can you send that via text message instead of email?
Yes, that can be both, yeah. I believe if you would have given a phone number, it would have been sending it to just email right now. Okay, so we're adding that. There we go.
I'm just curious about our own. If you go to fscj.edu, there's a search on the top right, and it has a bunch of our old catalogs on there. So is it gonna, you have to click those, you have to search and then find it and then click it again to open it. So if I were to search for something that was in an old catalog, but it's no longer current, do you think it would find that old and potentially give outdated information?
So catalogs usually are PDFs, right?
It's actually in HTML, I think.
Okay. So yeah, I mean, so look, it doesn't, there's no way for it, you have to be the curator of that content, right? So you have to give it the right information, just like any employee or anybody, you have to put the right things in the user manual or the guide, that employee manual, whatever it is that you're onboarding somebody with. So it's not magic, right? It's just scraping content and it's making meaning out of those questions and adding them to the prompt. So if you give it, old content, it's going to provide old content to the user. Now, one thing that you saw one of the things is synchronizing daily, right? There was an option in there, sync daily. One of our partners, we got an error, what was it? Abuse report, because our bot was actually scraping their websites thousands, like it was going immediately and going and hitting the site thousands of times per minute, trying to scrape the website, and they had it set up to sync daily for the whole website. So we got an abuse report the other day, and it was really interesting. I'm like, we never thought about that case, that the websites can actually take that load in. So we put some measures for that, but we don't recommend you have that available for old content. So please curate your content. You're going to get the best answers that way. We have time for one more question.
So we have one of these older kind of chatbots on our website, and one of the first things it does is goes through like an intro script. So I guess you could send them to like a form if you wanted to collect your data. Any thoughts or best practices surrounding that?
Yeah, so what Eric showed you before, if the bot is not enabled on our on element, you're going to get that form. So basically you're collecting their email, you collect their first, last name, so it starts a conversation with you. And obviously we have implemented element to work with anonymous users as well. Some people just don't want to give that out. So you can't set up a script, right? It's natural language. So if you say hello, it says hello, how are you, how are you? So it does that automatically for you, but there is no specific script. And then one of the that's part of the tools components, right? So if you want to say, hey, we want to enable an information request form to be collected, for somebody to reply back to you, so that can be a tool that we can enable in there. And now we'll go through, pull out your information from the form, the fields that you want to collect, and you'll go through one by one and ask those questions and say, okay, I need to know a little bit more, I need to know a little bit more. So it's a more conversational approach, but it's a tool rather than a script, the way that you think about version 1.0 processes. So it's much more kind of natural in that way. All right, so we are at time. Hopefully this kind of gave you a peek at a little bit more in depth on the AI, how we're implementing it, how BoltBot works, and of course it's available today, and we're adding features and functionality to it every single day over the next few months as part of that roadmap, to basically get it in parity with a lot of the tools and functionality that users are able to do, or students need to do.